Now we are recording.
Okay, thank you. And just to let everybody know, we are recording today, so we'd ask just to protect your confidentiality that you hold any comments, questions until the end, but feel free to drop it in chat, okay, if you have a question along the way. I'd like to welcome everybody today to what I consider one of our most important presentations. Don't get chomped by the Gainesville rental market. Tenants beware. I know we call this we call it Leasing 101, right, Alicia?
Has many names.
It's also a name, has many names. It's so important because a lot of people are going to be moving into Gainesville. Our students, we want to protect you, make sure that you're aware. And I want to give full credit to my colleague, Alicia, for putting this together. Alicia, over the years, right, Alicia, many thousands of cases have gone into this. So we've got a great data set. We're happy to share all the information that we have. And it will also be available on YouTube. Okay, the presentation. So feel free to check us out there as well. That being the case, let me just introduce us very briefly. My name's Lane Prebor, and I've been an attorney at Student Legal Services for coming up on a decade now, right, Alicia, I think? And done a lot of landlord-tenant cases, not as many as Alicia. I'm joined today by my good and great colleague, Alicia. Alicia, would you like to do just a brief introduction?
Yes, I'm Alicia Tabag. I'm one of the attorneys here. I'm also the associate director, probably because I've been here the longest. I started here back in 1993 as my 3 to 5 year job that has now become my career. And so I've been doing landlord tenant in Gainesville probably for the past 28 years. So I'm very knowledgeable as far as all the trends that have happened over the years. And unfortunately, over the years, tenants' rights have declined. And a lot of issues have arose, and we're going to cover most of those, the most common cases that we see here in this presentation today.
Thank you, Alicia, for that. Okay, let's get started. We have a quick disclaimer just at the very beginning. We want to remind you that this is general advice only. We do not want you to rely on this, okay? And again, if you need more specific advice, feel free to make an appointment. We'll give you all that information, okay, later on as we go through this. Also, remember that anything that we're saying today is the position of U.S. Student Legal Services only, not necessarily reflective of the official policy position of UF, Board of Trustees, Board of Governors for the State University System of Florida, or the state of Florida. Alicia, I think I covered about everybody there, right?
You're covered.
Thank you.
We're attorneys, we cover everybody.
Thank you. And again, just to remind everybody, it's not confidential today, so it may not be protected by attorney-client privilege. And again, contact us after the presentation, or we'll give you all that information as well. And next slide is really content notice, and it's the obligatory, we give kind of just a warning here. This is a best practices guide. Now, again, I'm going to give full credit to Alicia. She's 100% responsible for this particular presentation. And I think I looked it over a couple of times to help Alicia. Many hours went into it. This is a best practices guide, okay? And we're presenting all the information today in a legally neutral, nonpartisan, non-controversial format. We don't take sides here. We don't get political, but that being the case, if anything is offensive or upsetting in any way, you are not required. Okay, this is not mandatory viewing. And again, if you want to comment, we just ask that all participants create an atmosphere of mutual respect and sensitivity as we want all of our gators to hold themselves to the standard. And just a quick shout out real quick to our friends at Off Campus Life for helping us as well with this. And a reminder to everybody, please stay safe during COVID. We've got some increases in cases recently. And I think we just got a couple of HR updates, right? And alerts, Alicia, on this matter.
I saw them, yes.
So, yeah, we all saw them. So just encourage everybody, whatever you need to do to stay safe, please do so again. Okay, first, let's get started on this. A lot of content here. You're looking for a place to live. What do we recommend from the very beginning? Because we've seen students make so many mistakes. We want you to visit the complexes at different times because we want you to check the noise, the parking, the lighting at night, making sure that you're safe. As well, you can always come to us, of course, and we'll do a lease review with you. But read the online reviews and never forget to speak to the current tenants, okay, when you're viewing. Most of our students are happy to share with you, okay, their experience about living in a particular complex. Also, Alicia has upgraded this, and there is a website, crimegrades.com, which is an excellent website to go to that'll tell you all about any crime in the particular region or vicinity of the complex that you're looking at. And if you're wondering about how much you might be paying for utility bills, you can actually contact GRU, even if you haven't got the specific unit number from the complex, right, Alicia? You can just basically get the layout, one bedroom, you know, if it's a 3-3 or 4-4, we mean 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms. You can get a comparable unit, go to GRU. They won't give you any confidential information about the person's names that are living there, but they'll give you a readout, okay, of the bills and what you can expect for the past few years. Lease agreements. Okay, so important here. Please don't rush and sign anything. And we want to tell you the importance because sometimes it can be difficult to understand when you're online. What's an application to lease? What's an actual lease? Okay, the language can be confusing sometimes, and we want to make sure that when you're going through online, you're not actually agreeing or signing up for a lease in Gainesville. Remember, once you sign up, it can be many thousands of dollars. So therefore, we want you to read everything and keep copies of these documents. And if you can get the copy of the landlord's signature, please do it. A lot of times what Alicia and I encounter when we're doing this landlord-tenant law is that our students don't have a copy of the lease, or they have a one-sided copy of the lease. We want to make sure there's no changes by the time the landlords have signed it. And remember, a lot of these leases now are going to be electronic, right, Alicia? We've seen this over the years. Yeah, but kind of
Especially
a
with
move.
COVID.
Especially with COVID, exactly right. Keeping everybody safe there. So it can be electronic. So before you go through all those clicks, you might want to come in and see us. Okay, have us review it with you. And remember, if the landlord promises you something or that leasing agent promises you something, please get it in writing. Okay, we're attorneys. We love to see things in writing. When you watch these attorney TV shows, they always say that, right? Is it in writing? This is what judges want to see. The reason is verbal modifications typically are not binding or proof of any different contractual matters. And the big one here, come to us for a free lease review. We'll be happy. We can look up the complex for you. We can tell you about issues that we've had, okay, with them. And we can tell you about if there's any things that jump out at us, right, Alicia? Individual leases. Okay, we're going to get into the difference between joint and individual. Individual leases, each roommate is responsible for their own rent and damages to their bedroom or bathroom. But there can be joint liability. Remember, if there's any damage done in the common or shared areas, including the kitchen, right? The electricity, cable, and telephone service are also may be shared on that. So that's something that you want to check as well. With roommate matching, remember, there may be no guarantees that you're going to be placed with those roommates that you want. So if that's something that you want, you've got to get it in writing, okay, to make sure that you will be matched.
Yeah, I mean, I think most leases, they have the roommate preference form, but
Yes.
it always has at the very bottom that we can't guarantee a perfect match, and we're not responsible as management for any misplacement of misassignments of roommates.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. That's right. So we want to make sure, right, if you really want to be with those roommates, that may be one of the reasons that you're moving in that apartment. We want to make sure you're protected. Joint leases. Okay, got to be careful on these because it can be joint and several liability. Now that's lawyer talk. What does that mean in plain English? It means one lease, and if one roommate doesn't pay or a couple of roommates don't pay, you can be stuck paying everything because there's 100% liability for the entire bill for that lease. And Alicia, we've seen this, sometimes $30,000, right? Can be 20,
some of the nicer
30,
apartments.
Yeah. Those homes and apartments, $20,000, $30,000. So, you got 4 people living there, it can get really up there. So before signing, talk to your expectations as roommates and realize that we also have a very nice form on our website, the SLS Roommate Rental Agreement, which can include things like, right, whoever cooks that particular night also does the dishes, right, for their food and things. You can specify if there's utilities, that all roommates split the utilities. If there's rent, that all roommates, split that rent as well. We recommend that you all sign the lease at the same time. Okay, we know that's difficult right now, in these times, but it's always better that everybody be on board at one time so everybody knows not just their rights, but also responsibilities. But remember that even if everybody's not together at one time, it can be binding. Okay, and be aware that one tenant, if they violate the lease, for example, that can be a violation by all tenants. Okay, if one tenant, for example, gets involved using drugs or something, that can be a reason to evict all.
Correct. I'm going to take over from you, Lane, now. I think these are my slides next.
Great, thank you.
So just to recap some of the things that Lane said, and just a checklist before you sign, make sure you check the start and end dates of the lease, and also look for any time specifications. Sometimes a lease may start on a date at 10 a.m. That's when you can move in, and then but you have to move out at the end of the lease by like noon. So anytime that you stay over the end date or time of your lease, you're going to be charged for extra days rent, and I think they can charge you double rent for that. Sometimes also you may have talked to the leasing agent and they may have said, okay, your lease can start August 1st, but then it goes to the manager of the property and they said, oh no, we only start our leases on the 15th of the month. So make sure when you get the written document that you make sure it's the start and end date that you bargained for. Also verify the monthly rental amount, and sometimes they also put the total rental amount. So make sure that the numbers add up. And just so that you know, it's been a common practice recently that the landlords would charge you for a full month's rent, but you don't start living there until the middle of the month. And now contractually, they're allowed to do that. So they can charge you August rent for August 1st, even though you don't move in until August 15th. And contractually, then you'd be responsible for that full month of rent. So also make sure all the blanks are filled in on the lease or crossed out, just because you don't want the management company to go back in after the fact and start filling in information that you never agreed to. Also, if you probably won't get your apartment assignment right away. Most landlords now will assign it closer to the end of the summer. So if you're not getting a specific apartment number when you sign the lease, make sure that if you're looking at a specific floor plan or certain features in the apartment, that at least that's noted on the lease. So sometimes if you're looking for a 3-3 or a 2-2, you want a balcony apartment or a poolside apartment, make sure it's written down on the lease. So then that way it's in writing and they're bound to provide that to you. And finally, review any documentation that is referenced in the lease, because most of the leases will refer to addendum A, B, C, D, or rules and regulations. If it's referenced in the lease and you sign the lease, then you're stating that you also are agreeing to those documents and have read those documents. So make sure that you have a full lease packet. And again, once you have that lease packet, before you sign, come to our office for a free lease review. I mean, I've sat down with a student and read through 2 or 3 different leases as they're trying to decide where they want to rent. So feel free, that's what we're here for. We'll be happy to sit down and review leases with you. I think Lane covered a lot of this already earlier, but just to go through online leases, just read everything carefully before you either have to click, initial, or type your name as a signature. Electronic signatures can be binding, so that's why you have to make sure that if you're intending to apply for an apartment, that you're actually filling out an application and not signing a lease. So read carefully, because there's usually dialog boxes that tell you what you're signing to. So make sure you read those carefully and take screenshots. If it says, oh, this is only an application, or it might say this is a lease. So always take screenshots of anything where you're agreeing to something, okay?
It's excellent advice about the screenshots, Alicia, as you're going through, right? To make sure you saved it.
Yeah, because once you click and it's gone, you don't know what you're agreeing to. And then the landlord produces something, no, this is what they agreed to when they clicked. So definitely take screenshots. Now with cell phones, it's so easy to do. And it's a good way to protect yourself, to have that evidence after the fact. So automatic renewals and selling of information, those are 2 recent developments in lease agreements. So basically, even though your lease ends on a specific date, some leases require that you give them notice of your intent not to renew and your intent to terminate the lease. It doesn't make any sense since it's your end date, but if you have an automatic renewal or notice of non-renewal clause in your lease, you have to give notice. Most leases will require a 60-day notice. This means 60 days before your lease ends, you have to let them know of your intent not to renew. If you fail to meet that deadline, then you can become obligated for another month or 2's worth of rent. So always check your lease for an automatic renewal. And I think this is recent in the past year, selling of your information. So what some leases have said is that landlords will furnish your information to third-party partners. So it might be to solicit you for business or whatnot. And also on the guarantor forms, it has a similar language. So check your lease. And if you don't want the landlord to furnish your information, make sure you follow the opt-out procedures that's in the lease. So next we're looking at subleases. So once you sign a lease, you're obligated to pay rent through the end of the lease term. Most leases do not have an automatic termination or early termination clause in it, in which case then you're going to be stuck having to try to sublease your apartment to another replacement tenant. And subleasing in Gainesville is not easy. Sometimes a leasing agent says, oh, it's no problem. You're going to go home for the summer. You can just sublease your place. But you'll find out soon enough that there's thousands of other people going home for the summer, and there's a lot of subleases available. So basically, if you intend to sublease, then go ahead and read your lease for any requirements. Sometimes it will require a guarantor for the replacement tenant. They'll have to apply for an apartment just like you did. You can go ahead and check to see if you're still on the hook, even though you're subleasing. Some leases will go ahead and say you're still liable as the tenant, even though that you're subleasing. If that's the case, then if your subtenant doesn't complete his obligations, then they're going to come after you. We've had cases where the original tenant was not released, and then they come back in the fall, then all of a sudden they have this bill for unpaid rent and damages to the apartment. Since they were still liable, they're stuck with the bill. So definitely check any requirements in your lease regarding subleasing. Sometimes there might be additional paperwork or procedures. There might be a sublease that will be charged, in which case you and your subtenant will have to decide who's going to pay that fee. And if most leases will say you have to have the landlord's prior written consent. And if you don't have the prior written consent and you still sublease, then that's a violation of your lease. So that means if the landlord finds out you have this illegal tenant residing there, they're going to kick that person out, and you're going to be stuck with paying the lease still. So again, we have sublease agreements on our website. So if you do find a subtenant, any sublease agreements that you sign with the landlord is for the landlord's benefit. You would have to enter into a separate agreement between you and the subtenant. So definitely check out our sublease agreements online if you go that route. Also, Off-Campus Life is a wonderful resource. We have their information later on in this PowerPoint, but you can go ahead and list your apartment on their apartment locator, or you can look for an apartment on their apartment locator. You're helping out another gator by taking over their responsibilities for their lease. Pets, okay. So some apartment complexes allow pets, a lot of apartments do not allow pets. So basically check with the landlord. If you intend to get a pet, or if you already have a pet, just make sure you read the lease to see if you're allowed to have one. Because most leases will say that you can only sublease with the landlord's consent, or I'm sorry, you may only have a pet with the landlord's permission. Check to see if there's any pet fees or deposits that are required. Check with the leasing office for any additional procedures or paperwork like a pet addendum. Requirements as far as breed or the weight of the pet may apply. So make sure you check to make sure what pets you can have, and then what you need to do to get that pet. Because most leases will say that if you have any animal, not just your pet, but if you have a visiting animal, that can be a violation of the lease. And then most leases will have a penalty, usually a monetary fine for having a legal pet, anywhere from $250, sometimes up to $500. So if you intend to get a pet for yourself, if you have someone visiting you that has a pet, check your lease to see what the penalties are. Because I've had a client who was just babysitting her boyfriend's dog for the afternoon, and she got hit with a $250 fine just for having the animal, even though it wasn't hers. So definitely check for any pet requirements. Emotional support animals are a new trend that's been recent. There are very specific specifications that you have to meet in order to have an emotional support animal. So I know that there was a law that was passed last year that specifies what your medical care provider has to put in a form to qualify your pet as an emotional support animal. If they do qualify, then they're not considered a pet. So the landlord should not charge you for a pet fee or a pet deposit. They can still require that you remove the animal if the animal is violent, a threat to other residents, or if they're loud and barking all the time. So there are certain reasonable conditions that the landlord can't put as far as having even an emotional support animal. Changing lease terms. Okay, generally speaking, when you have a contract, what you sign your contract, that is binding on both parties, and you really can't change that. But some of the leases will allow the landlord the discretion to change like rules, regulations, or operating policy. They're allowed to enforce that, and they can make changes as long as the changes are reasonable and not material. So of course, if they're going to be imposing a monetary amount on you that you have to pay a certain amount, then they can't really enforce that because that's something that's material and not reasonable. You can anticipate paying for that. Move-in concessions. So basically, a lot of times the rental market can be competitive. So landlords, to fill their spaces, will offer a free month's rent, reduced monthly rent, a Visa gift card. I think at one point they're offering the use of a scooter during the lease term. So basically, those are great. They're seasonal. So sometimes as you get towards the end of the summer and their spaces aren't being filled, then you see the landlord having all these rental incentives. So if you signed your lease before they were offering the deals, they don't have to give you the same deal. Or if they have a less rent, because sometimes they'll go ahead and drop their rental amounts. It doesn't mean that you get to change your lease amount to that term, to that lesser amount. So basically with the move-in incentives, if you default under your lease, like you move out earlier or whatnot, you would have to pay back all those move-in incentives after the fact. Okay, Lynn, I think the next one is yours.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Alicia. That was really good. And the emotional support animals, what Alicia was talking about, just to reiterate again, some of our students, if you do need an ESA, we call them emotional support animal, be aware, some of our students have paid the, $52, $54 to get one of those online letters. And and Alicia's shaking her head. It's a lot of landlords going to want something more than that. Okay. If you're just trying to get it as a pet, that's a little bit different. You really need to get a physician that's approved you, okay, for an emotional support animal. And again, of course, the service animals are a completely different thing. And, we can talk about that if you have any questions afterwards. Security deposits and redecoration fees. I like that grumpy cat here on it. Be aware, some of the leases I see, we see a refundable or non-refundable redecoration fees. I think the most I've seen generally is around $250. And more than that is rare. We generally see, but it's something you want to make sure, is it refundable or non-refundable? Because are you going to be getting that money back or not? Okay, is it considered a security deposit? Is it not? And what's covered normally? Normal wear and tear, basic cleaning or carpet cleaning, touch-up paint may be covered, may not be covered. That's why it's critical to know that. Once the landlord has your money, it's hard to get it back. Okay, so if you have any questions about those move-out charges or your security deposit's been scarfed by your landlord, come see us. And be aware there's some certain time frames, right, Alicia, around 15 days or so in regard to security deposits. So you really want to make sure that you're timely about it. Come review it with us. We can take a look at any pictures, and we'll get into the pictures just a second here. And what do we want you to do? Take pictures and video. Personally, and I think Alicia feels the same way, pictures are probably a little bit better. I've had the videos by my students, but our emails are usually limited to about 25 megabytes. So the videos can be a little unwieldy, particularly if you're going to go disputing it in court. Pictures are probably better. Take good pictures when you move in. I know it sounds funny, but there's a scuff mark on the wall, or something's not quite right, something scratched the countertops. You want to show it that it was there when you moved in. And also when you move out. Okay, so if you're watching now and you're getting ready to move out, during the summer term, make sure that you take good pictures. If you're getting ready to move in, Take good pictures, bookend it is what we're telling you. So we've got that evidence as your attorneys. And Alicia put this slide together. Not only do we want to take good pictures, but remember to get them the inside of the refrigerators, the cabinets, the drawers. Those can be really important on it. Okay. And the move-in condition report, just want to make sure the move-in condition report, if you see a scratch in the counter or something, make sure that you note it, okay, so that you're not billed for it later on. And then when you move out, we want to protect you against move-out charges. So make sure you follow the procedures and do a move-out condition report.
Keep copies.
Keep copies. Yeah, thank you, Alicia. Boy, yeah, that's the one thing. You turn it over to the landlord. Make sure you keep those copies. It's really critical. Next thing we're talking about is renter's insurance. Renter's insurance is relatively cheap most of the time at a low cost, but it usually is liable for your personal belongings, although some landlords may have you get it so that it protects them as well. Okay, remember that the landlord though usually insures themselves and their property, and they're not liable for theft, loss, or damage to tenant's personal property. And Alicia and I can't tell you how many times the leases say this, usually about 3 at least, right, Alicia, in them. So if you want to get that renter's insurance, some leases are going to require you to get it. Okay, and you have to pay a monthly fee for it. But you might want to check with your own parents' homeowner's insurance, because there may be coverage through that with little or no extra cost to you. It's relatively cheap, as we said, but remember those deductibles can be $500, $1,000, and usually our students only have a couple of really valuable things, a laptop and a cell phone, right? Okay, yeah, one thing I want to tell you is beware of multiple tenants. We have an ordinance in the city of Gainesville that residential neighborhoods around UF are usually limited to 3 unrelated people. Now I say usually, okay, because we're going to get in the high 90 percentile there. Single family homes, okay, is what it said. But there are exceptions to the rule, right, Alicia? There's a few special exceptions. Certain landlords, they're able to get a zoning exemption. Before you go having more than 3 unrelated people, though, you've got to remember that if they find out, if a neighbor, calls on you for having more than 3 unrelated people, you can get cited for that, and one tenant will have to leave. Okay, leaving the remaining tenants liable, right, for that whole lease price. So usually the way that we've seen it done, the landlords will look the other way, only have 3 tenants, sign the lease, and then the landlord, of course, denies knowledge of the code violation later on because the person's name, is not on there. But of course, they want to get as many signatures as possible sometimes. Now, I'm saying this, I'm blaming landlords for this, and certainly there are some excellent landlords out there and some not as excellent as some other landlords. If you have any questions about it, you can contact City of Gainesville Code Enforcement. If you look on the left right there, and actually, if you want to email us later on, we can give you a copy of this as well. So all those notes will be in there, and you can ask to see, can I have more than 3 unrelated people in my house? Oh, under construction, boy, we've seen a lot of construction, right, Alicia? The last few years, it has been nonstop, particularly in the Midtown area. So you need to know, when will the construction be done? And boy, we've seen some construction, particularly during COVID. The delays really have been beyond what the start of the lease term, and our poor students couldn't even move in. So we had to talk about canceling the lease, trying to get them alternative accommodations. So will the construction start during the lease? That's very, very important. If it isn't finished, do you have a right to terminate that particular lease, right? Is that contained in the lease language? We don't see that often, but we certainly consider that to be very important for you. And where will you stay in the meantime? Now, we've had some landlords, I know at least one of them, right, Alicia, years ago, put the students up in the Hilton Hotel, and my students were complaining about it. They don't have to do that. Typically, they put them up in the Hilton Hotel, and of course it wasn't what they contracted for, but they were nice enough to do that. A lot of landlords, all they have to do is abate rent, right, Alicia? Meaning that they prorate the rent for those few days that you can't move in there. Exactly right. And $30, $40 a day, that doesn't go toward a hotel here. Also, what if the amenities aren't done? The pool, gym, is that something, right, that you can cancel the leases? Now, we used to argue this all the time, right, Alicia? And most of the leases that I've seen now, the landlords have wisened up. And now almost all that language is in there, right, saying that these are amenities to the lease and extras to the lease, accessories to the lease, but not part of the room that you're bargaining for, okay? Yeah, in regard to mold, it's so important. Boy, I think I just had about 3 or 4 mold cases come in. It's
All
been
the
a
rain.
yeah, a lot of rain, been a rainy summer. We've had a lot of mold out there. And unfortunately, North Central Florida, something mold is a real issue. Mold's everywhere. Okay. And when you got a food source and you've got some moisture, you're going to have mold. Generally, don't panic. Okay. However, you've got to also realize that it's not regulated by the EPA, the state of Florida, Alachua County, city of Gainesville. So we have no federal, we've got no state, we've got no local, right? Codes or statutes on this. Why? Okay, well, when we contacted our scientist friends over at IFAS, they told us you can't get 2 scientists to agree, okay, on a standard. So that's why. Be aware that a lot of times code enforcement can cite that second bullet point, not for the mold itself. Remember, we don't have any codes or any ordinances on point, but for the underlying source of the mold and if it is a maintenance issue. Generally, where we see mold, right, Alicia, we've got a roof leak, we've got a plumbing issue, right? We've got, yeah, a faulty bathroom, right? You know, or air conditioner handler or something. There's generally an underlying issue, and that's why you have the buildup of mold and mildew. So if you contact code enforcement, their website, don't say mold. You can say that you've got a leak, you've got moisture problems, etc., which they can cite for, not the mold itself. Okay, a lot of the places are going to have you sign a mold addendum as part of the lease. And I know I'm going pretty quick here, but what the mold addendum basically says is you've got a responsibility to run that air conditioner, okay, heating and air conditioning at a certain level, because part of the idea of air conditioning is not just cooling, but also removing the moisture from the air. And there's not a real sweet spot here. You know, some landlords, you want to ask your landlord, what's a good optimal, right? Every complex is a little bit different. What should you keep that air conditioning at? You know, sometimes it may be 75 degrees, you know, sometimes it may be 72, 73 degrees. Okay. But ask the landlord to make sure that you hit that sweet spot. The burden of proof on mold, there's the bad type of black mold. Again, don't worry. Mold is generally black, a little bit greenish. But what we mean is the very dangerous type of mold, okay, that can affect in terms of respiratory, right, conditions, and again, those underlying health issues that you may have can cause health problems, and you're going to need an expert at that point. Contact us, and I know Alicia's put an excellent picture on here, probably one of the worst mold infestations I've ever seen, but you know, it can happen.
Well, before I take over on the next set of slides, let me just add with the mold addendum, a lot of times they'll point out that if you do have a water leak and you don't report it immediately to the landlord, then you become responsible for any mold remediation or cleanup that becomes necessary. So definitely, if you see a leak and some people say, oh, it's leaking, the sink, I can use the sink when it leaks, it doesn't matter. But then the cabinets get that moisture, and then all of a sudden you're replacing cabinets and whatnot. So definitely, if you see any kind of water damage, report it immediately to the landlord. So then that way you're not going to be blamed for any kind of cleanup or damages that result from that leak. So I'm going to go ahead and go into bed bugs. That's something that many years ago, our northern SLS attorneys would complain about bed bugs, and we're always like going, what bed bugs? We don't have bed bugs. Now all of a sudden, Florida has bed bugs. So you'll see as one of the addendums will probably be either a lease clause or a separate addendum regarding bed bugs, the same thing as to what your obligations are to make sure you prevent them. So the one thing that we have a problem with is the fact that bed bugs hibernate. So when you move in, you may not notice them right away. And then a few months later, all of a sudden, you're getting bit by bed bugs. But since they're easily transportable, a lot of times the landlord will say, well, he's 4 months into his lease, so he must have been somewhere and picked up the bed bugs and brought them in. So in which case, then you get blamed for the bed bugs. The landlord will go ahead and get pest control in there, take care of the bed bugs, but then shift the costs to the tenants. So that's one of the problems we have with bed bugs. It's just because how and when they got into the apartment. So if you do notice bed bugs, come and see us and we'll try to help you as much as possible. I think we have a message in the chat. So if you have any problems, whether with your landlord or with the roommates, maintenance issues that the landlord's not taking care of, don't just move out. Because if you move out, remember your lease is still in effect. and you're still responsible for rent to the end of the lease term. There may be certain things you can do to get the landlord to fix it, like a 7-day notice, but these are very specific legal processes. So definitely, if you are having problems, don't just move out, come see us first. So then that way we can advise you as to what's the best course of action and what your liability will be if you just vacate the premises. So like I said, just don't move out because right now the tenant and the guarantor is still going to be responsible for the lease. And at that point, if you break your lease, the landlord can send you to a collection agency. They can report a debt on your credit report. They can sue you, and then you're responsible for attorney's fees and court costs. They can do any or all of those options. So basically, just come see us first so we can look to see what your situation is and what's the best recourse for you. So as I was saying earlier, we do have an Office of Off-Campus Life as part of the Division of Housing, and they are very good. They have ambassadors that can meet with you to help you select apartments. They have the housing locator. Their Gator Guide is excellent. They have a lot of information, not just on apartment complexes, but on tips that you should know as you're looking for apartments and whatnot. Apartment tour questions, you can also contact them. They have a list of questions that you should ask as you're touring the different apartment complexes, things that you should be aware of. And then finally, you can make an appointment with one of their staff members and they can help you also answer any questions and tell you what your options are also. So again, as you can see, we always have all roads leading back to come to us for a free lease review. You can actually go to our website, studentlegalservices.ufl.edu, and apply for services and just sign up for a lease review. And then we'll set you up to come visit one of our attorneys, and we can tell you what we see as far as problems or concerns in those leases. And then here's our contact information. We're located on the 3rd level of the Rights Union in room 3500. You can call us at 392-5297 or visit our website, as I said, or email us at sls@ufsa.ufl.edu. And oh yeah, definitely always have the little feedback presentation. If you want to give us an evaluation so we can improve our workshops, feel free to just use a QR code for that. And I think we're going to now open it up to questions.
Oh, yes. Alicia, can you
stop recording?
Yes,
so
thank you so much.
Now.
And thank you, everyone.